Welcome, 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 one and all to Her Hollywood Highlights with Lexi McKinney and the one, the only, Joe Johnson.
I'm going to put that on my business card.
Please do. And resume, yeah, like you need a new resume. Everyone can just take a look at YouTube and see how amazing you are at everything you do. But yeah, no, that would be a great resume, great little thing to put on a business card. Well, we welcome you back here, folks, to the last edition of the year, which sounds kind of scary and crazy and makes me a little bit sad to say, but it is an exciting thing because that means going into 2025, we have things to look forward to and hopefully new movies to look forward to.
Yeah, I've seen the list of movies coming out in 2025, and I have to say, unfortunately, it's going to be a lot like the past year where there's a lot of sequels and reboots. And
a lot, yeah.
I saw a list of 10 movies to look forward to in 2025, and every single one of them was a sequel or a reboot. So
it's kind of a bummer, though, because
Yeah.
I feel like there's so much potential to be creative, and I think that a lot of producers and directors are kind of just getting stuck kind of just reprocessing things, changing things.
Well, the studios, they want money, they want cash, and they know that sequels and reboots are, in their eyes, a sure thing, even though they're not necessarily a sure thing, because there have been a lot of reboots and sequels that have tanked at the box office. So I think what people are starving for are original, unique, new movies that you can call your own and embrace.
I think so, too. As I was just picking my eye. Sorry, I feel like I have an eyelash in my eye. That's like the worst feeling ever. It's just make a movie about the top 10 worst feelings. One is getting an eyelash in your eye. But it's hard. Nowadays it's hard, too. I was reading something online that just said that sometimes you feel like you kind of get stuck. Like your creative juices, you've got ideas circulating. You just don't know how to get it down on paper and get it down where you want it. And then you kind of have like imposter syndrome. And I feel like that would happen for me, too, is you do have a lot of great ideas. And I think even in this podcast, we've talked a little bit about things we might have done in movies differently or maybe kept the same. And I don't know, though. There's just something that's missing in the theater. And my parents and I were talking about it, too, because they've been going to do that $5 movie day at MJR like every Tuesday. It's like a consecutive thing for them. They love going to the theater. And some of the movies that they were just watching the previews, they're like, it doesn't get me excited like it used to. And that's what's really sad about it, is there used to be so much excitement. Like you wanted to watch the previews to know what you were going to come back for.
Yeah, before COVID, I used to see, on average, 22, 25 movies a year.
Yeah.
And then I had to whittle that down into my, like top 10 favorite of the year. Mm-hmm. Since COVID, I've probably been to the movies. I don't even know if I've been to the movies 20 times since COVID. And every year it's hard for me to compile some sort of favorite list because there's not a lot out there that I love. And so when I look back at 2024, I can count on one hand the number of movies that I enjoyed. None of them have made my all-time favorite list. It's been a while since I've added a movie to my favorite list, but yeah, you're right. There's just something askew in the world of movies.
And I don't want to necessarily always blame COVID, because I see a lot of people saying that numbers declined because of COVID. And yeah, there's probably some stats, some data that does show that. But I think part of it, too, it can't just be all COVID, because I was so excited to go back to the theater once we were allowed to go back out. So I don't want to just say it was at fault. I think we were all really eager to get out and watch a good movie in person again. You can only stream for so long. And that's my whole point. And I think a lot of streaming platforms see that and realize you can't just keep changing out your libraries all the time. There's something nostalgic about going into a theater, especially when we have movies like Wicked out right now that like everyone, like different age groups, cultures, variety of people are coming together because they're so excited for it. So,
I think part of it is, as long as I've been going to the films, as much as I love the experience of being in the theater, we've all had terrible, terrible experiences in the theater.
True.
And now if there's a family with young children, they don't want to bundle them up and take them to the theater, so they watch them at home on television, on their streaming devices.
Like the
and
world's saddest or smallest violin playing right
Yeah.
now. Wah, wah, wah. But today, I'm really excited for this episode today because I think at the end of the year, every podcast should reflect on things. And I know this is a newer podcast, but I'm really, really enjoying every single week that we're able to sit down and talk about movies because it's something that you don't get to discuss every day. Like usually at work, well, for Joe Johnson, he's kind of cool, so he gets to talk about movies and things if he wants and gets to incorporate some fun in. But it's not always like a common thing to talk about. So when we really get to hear unique perspectives and opinions, that's what makes me so happy about this podcast is that we do get to combine both of our brains together and talk about how we feel about certain movies, how maybe we wish other movies ended up differently. But just reflecting on the series as a whole and just talking about everything that we've talked about, plus mentioning some of our favorite movies of all time today it's going to be great. And I just want to get straight into it. So enough of the other stuff, even though it's still important. Let's talk about it. Let's talk about our list.
Let me preface this by saying, I grew up in a movie theater. It was a cheap form of entertainment. There used to be a thing called the dollar show, where if a movie had been in the theater for like the better part of a year, there would be these budget theaters where a family can bring a whole family in.
Yeah.
And pay like $1 a ticket to see
Isn't that
movies.
wild?
And so because it was a cheap form of entertainment, my mom would take me and my brother and 2 sisters to the dollar show. And I remember being in the movie theater almost every weekend. And so movies growing up they were a big part of my life and helped shape me, into who I am today and form my opinions about life.
Right.
And so movies, are really important to me. And so when you talk about our favorite movies, the list that I have here in front of me isn't necessarily the greatest movies ever made. That can be a separate list. These movies, this list of 100 movies I have here in front of me, are the movies that impacted me growing up, the ones that I saw and had my jaw hanging open in the theater, or sitting next to my mom and hearing her laugh out loud at a movie. Those are the movies that make up my 100 favorite movie list.
So that's fair. So you kind of, when you were making this list and composing everything together, you kind of had like a rating system in mind. It wasn't just, okay, I'm not going to look at the continuity. I'm not going to look at the, the dramatic, the irony. I'm not looking at all this. I'm looking at what it did to me, the imprint that it left on me throughout life. And I really like that because I think that's important too, is that there can be movies that are way better quality, right? Because it's hard to say unless like you're a critic what the best is. I mean, we can of course make our own and speculate and then have facts to back it up. But I kind of did the same thing. I really focused on this list, and like I was telling Joe even before we started, it was really challenging. Like last night even, I kind of put some movies together throughout like the past couple of days of just that I knew I wanted to incorporate in the list, but they didn't have a place. Like they didn't have a placeholder. They were just kind of on a list, and I was like, okay, I know I like this movie a lot. But it was more or less for me, the feelings that I got and thinking about it. Like I remember a lot of the times I first saw these movies that are on my list, and it that was the imprint that it left on me. Was I saw it once and then I could see it again and again, and it was just like the first time.
And that's a good point. I've seen people post on Facebook, asking, "Oh, what movies have you seen more than once?" And I'm like, more than once? That's almost every movie I've ever loved.
Right.
These movies that are on my list, I've seen dozens of times, if not 100 times. I mean,
for sure.
My top 10, I'm sure I've seen each one of those 100 times on cable and VHS and DVD and at the theater.
Yeah.
When I was younger, if there was a movie in the theater that I liked, I'd see it in the theater 4 times, 5 times.
Yeah.
So most of these movies that we're going to be talking about today, I've seen multiple times.
Well, I think too, and one thing is, what I used to do is even before, like, this was kind of in the weird era when like Netflix was kind of shifting from just being where they sent you out videos and that was their process in the beginning.
Yeah, I love that. I miss that.
Right? It was, I remember when they like first became a thing and it was like the cool thing, but it did make me sad. Like you couldn't go to Blockbusters anymore. And that was like, I have so many memories in Blockbusters because my parents, that was our tradition, was we wouldn't necessarily always go to the movie because it did get kind of pricey. Like popcorn for a family of 4 being $50 is outrageous. But going to Blockbuster, and there was something about like picking one or two movies that we got to rent.
Hoping that the copy's there. I hated when you had like the artwork for the movie and you're like, oh, it's there, and then you grab it and there's no VHS tapes behind it or no DVDs behind it. And it's like, oh, then you got to go to your second choice, you know.
I don't see that for me like just brought me back to standing in the store. It's just so crazy how movies but that's how important they are, is that they do help us to reflect on different time periods, on feelings, on what we were going through at the time. And that's what I love about characters, especially, is so many of these movies were picked because the characters, like the development, the plots, how they felt, you sort of immerse yourself into the atmosphere, and that's what I love about movies. And I think you're the same way. As we've talked about, especially when we were talking about some John Hughes movies, that was a very surreal experience for you. You were going through high school, you were feeling emotions, there were different types of battles and decisions and growing up that you had to go with. So to kind of immerse yourself back, you kind of reflected on what the culture was like, what the music was like, what people were wearing, all those great things. And that's what I love about the cinema.
I have a question for you. I don't know if this is going to put you on the spot, because I was thinking about this the other day. When you think about your list of your 100 favorite movies, what genre do you think is represented the most on your list? Is it comedy? Is it romance? Is it horror? Is it action adventure? What would you say, what genre appears on your list most often?
I'd have to go through, because I feel like I could, but I will say I do think that there's two genres that would definitely stick out the most. At least this is my assumption. And it would definitely be rom-coms, because I have quite a bit of rom-coms, because I just love a good laugh, and I love the guy gets the girl at the end of the movie. Who doesn't love that feeling? But there's a lot of action too, if I'm being honest. It's action and rom-coms. Like, I think those are like pretty evenly distributed, maybe one more than the other. But it's hard too, because you have to consider, like, I have the Rocky movies in here, and like there's several of them. There's several Die Hard, there's Lethal Weapon. So like those all account for a lot of action movies, where the rom-coms don't necessarily have 1, 2, 3 installments or additions added onto their long list. But I definitely say those two genres. What about you?
Probably I would have to say that the genre that's probably represented the most on my list would be comedies. Okay. I love comedies. Something about just being in a theater and having these memories of falling out of my chair laughing at some of these movies, and stepping out of the moment and looking around and seeing a theater filled with several hundred people all laughing out loud at the same time. I love comedies, but like you, action adventure probably takes up a lot of that list as well. So comedies, action adventure, some fantasy stuff, that makes up the bulk of my list.
That's fair. So I guess the easiest way to do this is, I guess we can kind of go back and forth and kind of compare and contrast. But let's start with this, because this is a question that I really want to know. Of your list, right, you've got all these movies laid out. What movie did you like automatically 100% know was going to make that list? Whether you were like, this is the first movie that comes to mind.
Well, I could say that about my top 10, but let's talk about the number one movie on my list, which is a no-brainer for me. It always surprises me when I ask somebody, what's your all-time favorite movie? And they go, oh, let me think about it. And I'm like, really? Really? You got to think about your all-time favorite movie of all time? So I have to set this up by saying, imagine being a 10-year-old kid, and the only movies that were in theaters that were geared toward kids were like Disney and stuff like that. And, as a kid, we would go to the theater, and I would always be like, yeah, those were okay,
Mediocre.
And I didn't feel like there was a movie that spoke to me. I felt like it's like, oh, these are kid movies, and then these are adult movies, and there's nothing in between.
Yeah.
Then I'll never forget this moment. I was at summer camp. So this would be summer of 77. I'm at summer camp, and they hand out these little paper magazines that encourage kids to read. And on the cover of this little paper magazine, which I still have to this day, has these weird alien characters on it that I had never seen before. And I was like, oh, my God, what is this?
Yeah.
And I'm turning the pages, and I find the article. And there's images, the first images I had ever seen from a little movie called Star Wars was in this little paper magazine. And I'm like, what is this? It was unlike anything I'd ever seen. I'm voraciously reading this article. I could not wait. I begged my mom, can we go see this movie? Can we go see this movie? And I have this vivid memory of being in, I think it was a station wagon because we had multiple families all going together.
Right.
And we pulled up into a movie theater called Beacon East. It
Okay.
was in East Point, I believe.
All right.
And I remember looking up at the marquee and seeing one title on the marquee, Star Wars.
Star Wars.
We pulled in, we went into the theater, and I have never been the same since. That movie
Wow.
changed me. Like, I finally found a movie that spoke to me, that stirred my imagination, that made me question how they did it.
Yeah.
How did you pull this off? So I was reading articles about blue screen technology and all the effects, and I emerged a different person after having seen it. I bought all the action figures and comic books and magazines and everything I can get my hands on. So hands down, Star Wars had the biggest impact on me as a kid, and might be why I work in this field today, because I was so curious about the production process of Star Wars that it made me who I am today.
I think it has a big influence, and I like that you said this too from a perspective as a kid, is that when I was younger and learning to read like the thicker chapter books, it was sometimes hard for me to envision the scenes and the characters and what they would look like and what they would talk like. I don't know if you ever thought that way, but I did love reading. It was just hard making that connect. Like, it felt like there was a disconnect, if that makes sense, because I had a hard time immersing myself into a universe. But then so many movies were being transferred, I should say so many books were being transformed into movies, that it made it easier for me almost to like read the book. Does that make sense? Like, I know sometimes movies change that up, but because you saw this little picture and then it inspires what's going to be next, and then you actually see Star Wars in representation, I think it did a lot for so many people, and it continues to.
Yeah.
Star Wars is probably one of the most popular, it has to be one of the most popular movies still to this day. I don't think it'll ever die out, ever.
Yeah, I think every new generation, there are parents who introduce their kids to Star Wars, and I love watching on TikTok, parents will aim their phones at their child as they're watching Star Wars or Empire Strikes Back for the very first time. And I get emotional because I'm like, I wish I can see these movies again for the very first time. And I love seeing the reaction from children watching those movies for the first time and knowing that they're being impacted the way I was impacted as a kid.
That's such a beautiful thing, though.
Yeah.
So I'm glad thank you for sharing that. It's kind of nice. See what movies can do to you. They can bring out all the good. This is your call. This is your call to action to make your 100 top movie list.
Now, that was my number one. I'm dying to hear what your number one is. Okay. What is your number one?
So here's the thing. There's like the top three are kind of emerged where I'm still debating because it's hard for me to say which one's my favorite because I have seen, let's say, like, of the three, two of them many, many times. And one of them I have not seen as many as the other, but it still holds weight for me because it kind of did the same thing, but it did it at my age now. So when the Barbie movie came out, which I think I kind of talked about, that movie did a lot for me as an adult on reflecting on my life, and in the best way, because it wasn't, it wasn't just about, it was about the problems that really happened as humans too. Like it did emerge itself into Barbie land and fiction and all that, but it also was very real on what humans are like and what experiences are like. It really impacted me. Like, the more I think about it, I cried at that movie. That was the last movie that I cried at.
They cried.
So I did have to put that in my top three. Is it my number one? I don't know if I can say that because I haven't rewatched it enough times to say that.
Yeah.
But it did obviously kind of move forward pretty quickly because I'm like, that made an effect on me. Like, that really, scenes in it. I was sitting there with my younger sister and I was like, that was like our childhood, and I felt like we were reliving our childhood just sitting next to each other in a movie theater. So I had to put it up there because it does speak to me. Do I think, like I said again, it's my number one? No. But the other one is Jaws.
Those are two different movies.
Those are two completely, and this is where I get into action. I love a good action movie, and sharks are my favorite animal. And so when I first watched Jaws, I was really nervous about it because when I was younger, for some context, my dad, we went down south to Florida quite a bit, and he loves sharks too. I think that's why it became my favorite animal. Is my dad and I have always been really, really close, and when I was younger, he went swimming with sharks. And I was so scared for him as a kid, right? Like you're hearing your dad going to swim with these sharks. I'm like, Dad's gonna get eaten alive. He's gonna be eaten alive. But then, the older I got, like the marine life and the oceans, I had so many questions about, and just if I could study the oceans, that would be great. But it's not the same as like when I get to do news or write stories and that. Like they're two different. But parts of me is like, what if I could merge both together? Wouldn't that be fascinating?
I'm curious, how old were you when you saw Jaws for the first time?
I think I was younger. I mean, I want to say I probably made my parents put it on at 5 or 6
Wow,
because I wanted to
that's
watch
younger
it.
than when I saw it.
They well, my mom was more skeptical, but my dad was more or less like, I think he was more scared how would I react with fake blood, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? And I wasn't really scared of it, but I think younger me was more like on the edge of her seat, like what's going to happen?
Well, that music
gonna
always
happen?
kind of tipped off that something was going to happen. So I could imagine you as a child sitting there watching this and hearing, da-da, and you're like,
Yeah.
uh-oh,
And then-
here it
yeah.
comes. Da-da.
And then every time you jump in a pool after that, you're like, oh my gosh, a shark's going to emerge from the drain at the bottom of the pool. But it did something to me because I think that movie alone, everything was done perfect in my opinion. I love Jaws. It has to be the first one though. I like some of the other ones. The second one's not bad. But when you get into like, I think it's like the fourth one, I'm like, it doesn't do it as much for me. And then I've seen like Deep Blue Sea and other, but it's the shark movie that lasts and made an impact. And I love the oceans. And so just everything about it fascinated me. How did they film it? What were the locations? What were the actors like? Everything, especially when they're getting towards the end of the film and they're all seen and they're singing in the little cabin of the boat. Like there's just this eeriness, there's this tension, there's what's gonna happen. In the way everything panned out, I mean, I really liked that movie.
Yeah. Well, seeing Jaws at the movie theater is one of my favorite memories of seeing a movie in a theater. So Jaws came out, 76? 75,
I want to
something
say,
like that.
yeah, I want to say it came out. My dad was about the age
Yeah.
that I first saw the movie, so yeah, I think he was 5, and
Okay.
he was born in '70. So yeah, I
Yeah,
think
so it was around
75.
then. And so I was probably about 8 years old or so when Jaws came out. Now, I grew up in Hamtramck, Michigan, and we had one of those old-timey one-screen movie theaters called the Martha Washington Theater. You'll have to look up images online one day. It's something out of
Yeah.
the past.
See
It's
the
not there
history of
anymore.
it.
They tore it down. But imagine going to this one-screen movie theater, meeting up with all my friends from school. My family would be there too. We went in to see this movie called Jaws that we had heard about. And I remember having popcorn on my lap, watching this movie, really getting into it. And there's one moment in particular where they find the sunken boat. And so they, I think Richard Dreyfuss's character puts on the scuba suit and like goes down to investigate the boat. And he finds that hole in the boat, and he finds a shark tooth embedded in that hole. And as he's
Yeah.
trying to pull the shark tooth out, this head pops out. I lost my popcorn.
You lost your
went
popcorn.
flying. And I remember seeing popcorn in the air all around me. All of us simultaneously jumped and had the popcorn fly up in the air. It was like the 4th of July, like popcorn going up everywhere. And you go from that moment of horror to then laughing, like you're looking at everyone around you laughing. Like,
yeah,
that was
we really
awesome.
did that. Yeah.
Yeah, and it was such a great moment. And, I remember reading that Steven Spielberg regretted putting that moment in because it was an afterthought.
Yeah.
He thought that there weren't enough scares like spread out throughout the movie. And before
Oh.
adding that scene, the biggest scare was we're going to have to get a bigger boat.
But, yeah.
When Chief Brody is chumming the water and Jaws comes out of the water.
Yeah.
That was the biggest scare.
Yeah.
They added, they shot like in a swimming pool, the scene with the head coming out of the boat. And he regretted it because it took the edge off the later scare that he wanted to be the big scare. But
Yeah.
people already had that big scare earlier in the film.
Yep.
So he didn't get the reaction that he wanted later in the film. But for me, that was one of my greatest memories of seeing a movie in the theater, was the whole audience all jumping at the same time. That was really amazing. It was a great memory.
It's a core memory. I see. It makes me so sad because there were movies that I saw as a kid that did leave an impression, and they're on this list, and they still have, reigns on some of the other movies, but there's so many classic movies, like, of course, Jaws. Of course, I would love to have seen Scream in theater. There's multiple movies that I could name in the past that would have just been even more captivating if you were there, even if you were your younger self. And I'm sure, I really hope, I think Barbie's the closest that it's gotten to a movie that I've seen in person at my age, where, I'm not a little kid anymore. I'm an adult and I make rational decisions for the most part. But it did something to me that brought me back to my childhood, because a good movie can always do that.
Yeah.
But the other movie is actually The Other Woman. Have you ever seen that?
Never heard of it.
So it is a rom-com, kind of more comedy. It's got Cameron Diaz in it. It's got, oh goodness, Is
that where like the two other women team up to get revenge on the guy who's been cheating?
It is.
All right,
yeah.
so I know of it. I just haven't seen it.
So it's from 2014. It's got Leslie Mann, Kate Upton, Cameron Diaz, and Nicki Minaj is even in it, the rapper. But that movie is like a comfort movie to me because it brings me back to like high school, and it was just like kind of the movie that all, the friend group would watch.
Yeah.
And so I love that movie just because there's something about the female empowerment, and you feel those emotions. And at the time, of course, boys in high school is a complicated subject for girls because you get your heart broken and you feel so many emotions. But that movie was like my comfort movie. It really was, because anytime something was bad, well, what would their characters say? And that movie did it for me. It's a comfort movie. I've seen that movie. It's probably close to 100 too.
Wow.
It really is. That's one movie. And it was on, where were we? I think my boyfriend and I were on vacation one time. And it was actually on cable. And I was like, oh, have you ever seen The Other Woman? He's like, no. I'm like, you've never seen this movie? He's like, no. He's like, why would I watch it? And I'm like, well, you're watching it. Because there's something about it. And I think it's very real. And I think it brings out the beauty in friendships, too, because you see how two people went through the same issue with the same guy, but then they had this really awesome relationship emerge.
Yeah.
And they really grew as people. And I love a good movie like that. Plus, you just laugh. Like, some of it's just funny humor stuff that girls get. And I don't know. There's just something about it that brings me back to high school, and I love the feeling. But I could never not watch that movie. Like, my daughter one day, when she's old enough and can handle some of the stuff in that movie, let's just say, I want her to watch it.
All right, I'll have to add that to my to be seen list.
Give it a watch.
Now, the number 2 on my list. Again, this is another memory I have of seeing a movie at the theater. So again, my mom had taken us to the Dollar Theater, and there were 3 movies playing at this Dollar Theater, and basically they would just be running all day. So movie number 1 would play when that ended, movie number 2 would play when that ended, movie number 3 would play, and then it would start all over again. And so we went to go see this little movie that I had heard about called Raiders of the Lost Ark. Now, all I really knew about it is that Han Solo from Star Wars was in it in this new role. I'm like, really? Han Solo's in this? Knew not a whole lot about it. George Lucas and Steven Spielberg had dreamt up the idea on a beach, saying, I have this idea that's kind of like James Bond, but it's more of like a relic hunter sort of a thing, done like old-timey movie serials from the 30s or whatever. And so the thing I remember about seeing Raiders of the Lost Ark was my family entered the auditorium halfway through Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Yeah.
So we find our seats, we sit down, it's in the middle of the movie. So we watch the rest of Raiders of the Lost Ark, stay for the next movie, whichever it was. I don't even remember what movie it was. Then Raiders of the Lost Ark started playing again. So my mom was like, well, let's see what we missed. And we watched Raiders of the Lost Ark up until where we had walked in.
Yeah.
So the first time I had seen Raiders was backwards. I saw the second half first and the first half second. And so like the boulder scene, which is at the beginning of Raiders of the Lost Ark, such an epic moment, epic scene.
Yeah.
In my brain, it was in the middle of the movie. Which is so odd. But Raiders of the Lost Ark was so thrilling just one of the greatest adventure movies of all time.
Yeah.
I've seen that movie so many times. I have replica props in my home, the hat, the whip, all the stuff. It had such a huge impact on me. I absolutely love the memory of seeing Raiders of the Lost Ark in the theater and watching it countless times and picking up new little details and things along the way. So Raiders of the Lost Ark is number 2 on my list. And then number 3, again, I have these vivid memories of seeing these movies in the theater. So
Yeah.
you've probably heard of a TV show called Family Ties. It
Yep.
had Michael J. Fox on it. It made him a star.
Yeah.
And my sisters were like, hey, we want to go see this new movie that has Michael J. Fox in it. And I rolled my eyes like, you just want to see him because he's cute and you got
Yeah.
a crush on him. And I'm like, all right, I'll tag along.
Mm-hmm.
So we went to this theater. It's called Abbey Theater. It was in, over in the Troy area there.
Oh, wait.
And,
I think I do know where that is.
Yeah, it's not there
It's
anymore.
not
It's
there
like
anymore,
a micro
yeah.
center now. But
Uh-huh.
I have this vivid memory of, reluctantly going to the theater with my sisters to go see this Michael J. Fox movie called Back to the Future.
Mm-hmm.
And again, coming out of that movie, a changed person. Like,
Yeah.
it made me realize what movies can be. It was so
Absolutely.
far out there. And as the movie is playing, it's like, wait a second, his mom has a crush on him? Like, what is happening here? It was life-changing. I mean, it was such an amazing experience to have seen that movie in the theater when it first came out. And that ranks up there with the movies that I have seen so many times I've lost count. If it's on this weekend, if I'm scrolling through channels looking for something to watch, I'll stop and watch it. I've
Yeah.
watched it over and over and over again. And again, it's had such a huge impact on me that I've met most of the cast. I
Yep.
collect a lot of the prop replicas. I have a flux capacitor at home. The only thing I don't have is a full-size DeLorean, which is on my bucket list someday.
It's on the list. I
But,
hope you
yeah.
get that. You kind of need
Oh.
that's a really key component to add to the collection, especially for that movie.
Yeah.
Yes.
So those 3 movies, as you could imagine, had such a huge impact on me where I have vivid memories of seeing the movies in the theater and walking out of that theater a different person. And that's something I can say about a lot of these movies on my list is they changed me in some way. They added a piece to me. They rewired my brain. I when I see a movie I love, I emerge a different person.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. It depends too, I think, on the genre for me because, we kind of mentioned our top 3 and why they're our top 3, of course. But there's also, looking at this list, like there's a lot of honorable mentions because there are certain feelings, there's certain characters that kind of do something to you as a person and you just always reflect back because most of it has to do with they were just such a great actor, actress that they brought a role to life, a character to life that you want to be a real character. Like you so wish that they were a real character.
Yeah.
And looking at some of these movies, I do want to mention our honorable mentions because I don't think we can go through all 100 unless we had a 24-hour challenge. But I definitely would like to just say that these are a few movies that have impacted me and still impact me today. I definitely want to talk a little bit about Top Gun and Top Gun Maverick because those movies, I know they were spaced way far apart.
Oh, yeah.
The first and
What, almost 40 years apart. Yeah.
yeah. But those movies have always been like chef's kiss to me.
Huh.
Because I mean, how can you not love Tom Cruise? I just think he's great in every role. Mission Impossible, whatever the role is, he can do it.
He's one of the biggest movie stars that have ever walked this earth.
But I really think that they did a great job with all the character development. I think that the music, like when I hear Take My Breath Away, it's not even who's singing it. It's, oh my gosh, it's the Top Gun movie song.
Yeah.
There's certain pieces of it that bring me back, and there's that feeling of being in love and, being this kind of smart guy that's kind of got a witty humor and all this crazy thing. I love those movies. Another movie I want to
Hold on,
mention.
before you move on, let me
yeah.
share my Top Gun is not on my 100 favorite movie list. I do
Oh,
remember
on
what a
contrast.
phenomenon it was when it came out. Like
Mm-hmm.
it was an absolute phenomenon when it came out and cemented Tom Cruise's place in movie history.
For sure.
But I saw it maybe once or twice in the 80s, and then I revisited it again before seeing Maverick.
Yeah.
And the thing I came away with, and I don't know if you agree with this or not,
Okay.
I'm like, Maverick is arrogant. He's cocky, almost to the point
He is.
of being unlikable. Like, he was so sure of himself and so arrogant that I found it a little off-putting.
Yeah.
Now, let me say this.
Mm-hmm.
So I watched Top Gun again.
Mm-hmm.
Then I went to see Maverick. And I don't know if this may surprise you or not. I enjoyed Maverick
More than
the first
yeah.
one because he had softened. He had learned. I mean, he was still arrogant in Top Gun Maverick.
Oh, he for sure
but
was. Yeah.
he had, his character had developed. Like,
Yep.
he was not the same arrogant, brash, cocky guy that he was in the first one. And I actually found myself liking the sequel better than the first one.
He was very much more likable in Maverick, for sure, 100%. I guess for me, I don't know. It might have been too. It's when you watch movies like that too. It's just the action and the thrill in it too. And having him, he definitely was a mouthful. He said a lot of things he probably shouldn't have. But I don't know. Watching the movie, that was another one. When I saw it in theater, I believe I went with like my boyfriend's family and my boyfriend because the ratings were so great when it came out.
Yeah,
I remember that I was like, I have to see it. And it did leave an impression on me. I thought it was a really good movie. But I was just thinking about it the other day too because like my grandpa, of all people, my grandpa does not see new movies. And like I think Top Gun Maverick was like one of the first that I think he actually like was waiting for it to come out. Like he was really excited about it. And so there's something about that, and it's just one of those movies. I wouldn't say it's like in my like top 20, but it is one of the movies that I do want to highlight because again, it's got the 80s, it's got the soundtrack, it's got the vibe. I like what they did in Top Gun Maverick a lot with the storyline, and Miles Teller, of course, is a gorgeous human. So he was in it, so he made me really excited.
You want to hear something crazy? I don't know if you watched the Tonight Show with Jimmy Fallon, but a few years ago, they do a recurring thing where they lip sync. They do a lip sync battle.
Yep.
And so Jimmy Fallon was taking on Tom Cruise doing a lip sync battle, and they were both great. But the moment I'll never forget is they singled out a woman in the audience, and both Jimmy and Tom Cruise are like right up to her, and they start saying, "You lost that loving feeling from Top Gun." Imagine being that woman, having Tom Cruise singing "You Lost That Loving Feeling."
She'll never be the same again.
How do you live after that? How does anything compare after that? I thought that was such a magical moment. That was really cool.
It's cool too because I know, there's been a lot of speculation about him because things with his religion and everything. Yeah, he's had a kind of a strange impact on the world of what people really think about him. But I do think at the end of the day, like all the interviews I've seen of him or how he interacts with people, I don't think he's a bad dude in real life. I think he might have different values, but we all have a different like system of our motivations and how we value things and our morals. So I guess it's not fair to judge everything everybody does. But
yeah, and you know that's a topic for another podcast. Do you judge somebody? Like, how do you separate the art from the artist? Like, I try to judge somebody based on the work that they've put on the screen and the movies that they've made, and I try not to allow their personal life to tarnish my love of the movie that they made. Like, one example is L.A. Confidential, which is one of my favorite movies. And apparently Kevin Spacey got into some trouble a few years ago. He kind of got canceled. But that doesn't affect the fact that I love that movie and his performance in it so much. So I try to separate that.
I actually wrote a paper in college. I was in a persuasion class. This was 2-3 semesters ago. I had to take persuasion, and one of the assignments was you had to take 2 different celebrities, politicians, whoever it could be, and you had to talk about a public scandal or something bad that was kind of around their name and how they reacted to people and if they were able to come back from it, because we see a lot of celebrities especially that might be involved in something bad, or there is proof that they did do something bad, and how does their career suffer, or how does it eventually, because I will say this now, there are a lot more people that are open to hearing 2 sides of a story than I think there used to be. Like, I think that TikTok, especially like with some of these content creators, there's been a lot of scandal. There was just one big one on one of my favorite. She's not a newer artist, but she's really hitting the charts. Sabrina Carpenter. Have you heard of her?
No.
She. Just kidding. She brings like a new era of Marilyn Monroe, like just beauty to the stage presence. I don't know if that makes sense. She's just such a confident and like smart on her wordplay. She's a really great artist. If you're ever interested, like just look at some of her stuff. She's really creative, of course. Anyway, but she was dating, what's his name? He's in Saltburn. Have you seen Saltburn?
No.
That's another movie that
Did that make your list?
Barry, no, it did
No?
not.
Okay.
I haven't seen it. I haven't seen the full thing, so I don't want to give it credit. Barry, what's his name? He's an Irish actor. He was in Batman. He was in The Killing of a Sacred Deer, Dunkirk. Barry Keoghan?
No idea.
So anyway, there's a lot of backlash going on right now, and I don't know how he's going to get the Sabrina fans back because he's not looking good. But I guess he cheated on her with like a content creator on TikTok who was way younger and all this stuff. So now he's got a really bad rep in people's mouth. So it's going to be interesting to see if he comes back because he was a really great known actress. But anyway, not to go in too far to that.
Let's rattle off a couple more of your titles and see what we have that overlap.
Okay, let's talk. I have some Harry Potter movies in there. I know that's a big one I wanted to touch on.
Your favorite Harry Potter movie?
Goblet of Fire.
Goblet of Fire, interesting. Mine was Prisoner of Azkaban.
That's my second, and I was going back and forth, but I gave it to...
I love the whole time travel element in the movie. It was so well done. I've never seen anything like it. I love the feeling of like fall or autumn throughout the film.
You feel the crispness in the air. Yeah, you do.
So as much as the first three Harry Potter movies are just fantastic. The first one is a little long, and the animation is a little crude. I thought the animation got better as the series went along. But it peaked at Azkaban. And then after Azkaban, I felt that each movie got darker and darker and darker.
Yeah.
I do love, is Goblet of Fire, is that the one with the Yule ball?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
my favorite part of it.
Awesome. Yeah, when Hermione comes out in her ball gown and everything, it's pretty moving.
It's something like the fantasy in it kind of too. It makes it, I mean, it's hard too because I love Half-Blood Prince. I like that movie a lot. Of course, the ending was like a very controversial ending. I mean, we all kind of knew what was going to lay out as the last two chapters would unwind. But Half-Blood Prince, like finding out the relationship of Snape and kind of seeing Harry Potter develop as an adult and how he's going to respond because now it's like kind of the spotlight's on him. I really liked Half-Blood Prince. I've seen that one the most of it all. But
was that the one that was broken into two parts?
Nope. So that would be Deathly Hallows.
Deathly
it's
Hallows.
the one
Okay.
right before Deathly Hallows, but it's still one of my favorites.
Okay.
I don't know. The Goblet of Fire just brings me back again. It was like one of the first books, Harry Potter books, I think that I ever like had an experience with.
Yeah.
So I think that's another part of it.
My one complaint about the Harry Potter series is I don't like the fact that Hermione got paired up with Ron.
I know.
Ron, throughout the series, was borderline abusive to Hermione, always poking fun at her.
They had a bad relationship, especially in the earlier ones.
Yeah, and so for those two to like hook up, and even I've heard that J.K. Rowling even regrets pairing them up because
Really?
it's not something you would want to encourage little girls to do to, forgive the bully and hook up with the bully. I mean, he was pretty nasty to her.
And she was very
It
intelligent
made her
and smart.
cry, yeah. So that's the one complaint. You ask me all the time, what would you change about a movie? If I can go back and tell the filmmakers, don't
pair them.
don't ship those two together. It felt forced to me.
So let me ask you this. So if they weren't together, would you ship Hermione and Harry?
Yes.
You would?
That's what I want. That's what I was hoping for. That's what I wanted to see. They had really beautiful moments together,
They did.
and I wanted to see those two get together in the end.
In another life.
Yeah.
They were the pair.
So that's the one thing I would change about the Harry Potter movies. Okay, but we digress. What's next?
Okay, let's talk about. I just have such a big list. I'm trying to incorporate the ones that I really want to hit on here. The Fugitive. Have you ever seen The Fugitive?
The Harrison Ford version?
Yes.
I
And
have
Tommy
seen
Lee
it.
Jones.
I love Harrison Ford and just about everything he does. I like The Fugitive. It did not crack my top 100, but it's a great action adventure film.
I love that movie just because I like the scene when he's like in the hospital and he figures out who done it, and he was going through and looking at everyone in the different types of what are the prosthetic arms when he was learning about that, and then like the old school computer, and then when he dyed his hair and he's on the loose, he was just a very strategic planner. I love that movie. Plus Tommy Lee Jones really brought that cop to life.
He was great.
He's a very talented actor. I couldn't imagine anyone, like if you were to name, this would be a really interesting topic, name all the cops in all of these top movies, who would be the one that you're like, this is the top cop, or who would you be the scared of? Tommy Lee pulled me over in his character. I'd be mortified. I'd be like, I'm going to jail today. There's no way going on.
I'm going to set you up. I'm going to say a line. Let me see if you know the next line. I didn't kill my wife. What's the next line?
I don't care.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, you got Harrison Ford on the edge of this like waterfall, basically. And Tommy Lee Jones is like, I don't care. I just need to bring you in. And then
he jumps.
It's such a great movie moment.
It is good. There's a few movie moments in that, too. And the fight, I mean, obviously, his wife dying was not optimal, but that's another one. This is a newer one. Let's see if you know this one. Anyone But You.
That just came out, didn't it?
It did just come out with Sydney Sweeney.
I have not seen it. I know the fellas love their Sydney Sweeney.
Mm-hmm.
I have not seen it, and I can go into some detail as to why I haven't seen it. Let's not go there.
Sensitive.
Yeah. So, no, I haven't seen it.
I love, it's just, I like the movie because I like how they emerge Titanic into it. They emerge it's the dynamic. I think actually we talked about why you don't like it. We did talk about this, I think, or why you wouldn't see it.
The reason is.
But I don't want to get into.
A woman said that to me one time.
Yes.
Anyone but you, and
I'm so sorry I didn't even think about that.
That hurts. So. Let's move on.
Let's move on. How can she? Well, I'll tell you one thing. If she ever listens to this podcast, she really missed a winner. So that's her loss. Yeah. So that's one. Parent Trap. Have you ever seen the Parent Trap with
the old one, Lindsay Lohan?
The old one, Lindsay Lohan.
Because there's one before. I think that Lindsay Lohan was a remake of an early film, right? Yeah. I mean, I knew of it. It was on my radar. I don't think I've ever sat down and watched it from beginning to end. Is Jamie Lee Curtis the mother in that one, or is that different
that's Freaky Friday.
Freaky Friday. Okay, see,
that's actually Freaky Friday made my list too. And they're making another one. They're making a second one. Did you know that?
Yeah. That's why it popped into my head. What else?
The Nice Guys. Have you seen that one?
I did, and I hated it.
You didn't like it?
I turned it off. I didn't see it in the theater. I saw it on cable, and people were saying really good things about it, so I sat down and watched it, and I don't think I got all the way through it. I think I turned it off.
I kind of liked it.
That's Russell Crowe, right?
Hold on. Yeah, I think so.
I think it's Russell Crowe, and who else?
Wait, maybe we're
Are we talking about different movies?
It's a comedy. Oh, yeah. Russell Crowe and Ryan Gosling.
Yeah,
it is. I don't know. I liked it. It was on Hulu. It did make my list. I kind of liked it. I liked their character dynamic. I think they balanced each other nice. So there's that one. What else? Pulp Fiction made it, of course. Ace Ventura.
Hold on a second. Don't blow past Pulp Fiction. We need to talk about Pulp Fiction.
Uma Thurman, my favorite part of the movie. No.
Pulp Fiction is another one of those movie theater moments where a friend of mine actually kind of dragged me to the theater. We had maybe 8 or 10 people get together to go see Pulp Fiction, and I didn't know what I was. Yeah, that used to be a big thing. We used to get large groups of people to go to the midnight screenings and stuff like that. And so I wasn't like Quentin Tarantino. I knew of him, but he wasn't quite the auteur that we know today.
Right.
And my buddy was like, "Come on, we got a bunch of people together. Let's go see this movie." And the first thing I remember sitting in the theater watching it was the opening credits that listed the cast. And I'm like, as they kept naming names in the opening credits, I'm like, Bruce Willis, Samuel Jackson, John Travolta, Uma Thurman. Like, this is one of the greatest casts I've ever seen in my life.
No, seriously, it was.
Yeah. And then with the twists and turns and everything that happened in that movie, that was one of the few movies that I saw in the theater that when I was done, I was sore because I was so tense. My muscles ached. I was gripping the armrest. Like, what are you doing? Don't go there.
Yeah, don't do that.
And in addition to that, again, this is a movie that changed me as kind of a filmmaker because I always liked my movies telling like a linear story, and Pulp Fiction
Doesn't
threw that
do
out
that.
the window.
Oh, no, there's
it
no
reaches a
rule.
certain point, then it goes back and shows, like, fills in the gaps that we missed earlier. And I never looked at movies the same way again. It made me realize that anything could happen in a movie. And, John Travolta, that was his comeback film, even though I've always loved John Travolta.
I see. It's so hard for me to believe that he ever really fell off.
Yeah.
Because there's not one movie I haven't seen that I didn't like him in, to be
he's
honest.
great. And so, yeah, the performances were great. The scenes were amazing. And it made Quentin Tarantino one of the greatest directors of all time. And he's followed it up with numerous films that I love.
Oh, so many.
So, yeah, Pulp Fiction
Did that make
is
your
right
list?
up there. Oh, definitely.
Oh, good,
Yeah,
good.
it's number... It's in my top 30.
Okay.
I may have to readjust things. It's hard for me to move that up because it's going to force me to move other things down, but it's in my top 30 all time.
I have, I don't know if have you ever seen The Passion of the Christ? Mel Gibson, I believe, directed it.
No, that's not something that appealed to me at the time, and I
Yeah.
heard it's almost glorifying violence and
The crucifixion scene is one of the hardest scenes I've ever had. That's
yeah.
one scene
See,
that I
can't
stomach.
do that to myself.
That movie I did put up there just because, I am very religious, and that movie for me did a really great depiction of what it needed to, but it was very brutal. Like, I mean, it took me, I would skip through because it was kind of tradition for my family to watch it during Easter time. We kind of continue to do it too, like if it's on, or I believe we have it on DVD too. But it took me a while. I would skip through the actual crucifixion scene because it was so bloody and ugly.
Yeah, I read a story once.
It was really bad.
Stephen King, who's the master of horror, went to go see Passion of the Christ in the theater, and he awkwardly got seated next to a young girl, like 6 or 7 years old. Parents brought a young girl to see Passion of the Christ, and he said he felt wrong. He felt dirty. That he said the girl started off by like covering her eyes,
Yeah.
but then she got desensitized to it.
Yeah.
And he's looking over at her, and she's watching this brutality.
Yeah.
And her parents are subjecting her to this brutality, and he's like, it was just wrong, and so not my kind of thing.
There's another movie that I don't know if you've seen it, The Terrifier. Those I will not
There's
watch.
three of
There's
those?
3 of them.
Yeah.
The second one, I cannot watch it.
I'm
it
not-
makes me sick to my stomach.
There's a few horror movies on my list, but horror isn't necessarily a genre that I'm drawn to. I
Yeah.
won't go see horror movies anytime other than like October.
Yeah.
Like I'll immerse myself in horror movies in October. The rest of the year, I don't understand people who are obsessed with horror.
There's
and their
so
whole
many people that
collection
are.
Is, I'll see pictures on Facebook. People are like, "Oh, here's my movie collection. It's all horror," and you'll see like Freddy's mask and Jason's mask and Freddy Krueger's glove. And I love some of those movies, but there are people who just are completely immersed in horror, and I don't understand that.
So I agree with that 100%. And I think that they take it to a new extreme nowadays. Those movies, now I watched the first one, and I didn't mind the first one. The second one, there's a certain scene in it, and if you ever watch it, it is like bad.
Yeah.
Like it is so detailed.
That's what I heard.
So graphic. It actually, like, I don't even want to talk about it because it'll actually make me feel sick.
Now, did those movies crack? Did that crack your top 100?
Oh, no.
Oh,
but we were
okay.
just talking about it because it did. Because I actually did put the first It, not the second one. But the first one did make my top because I was not the old, let me reiterate, not the older version that has what's his name in it.
Pennywise was Tim Curry.
Yes, Tim Curry.
That was a TV movie, so yeah.
Not that version, though I appreciate that they brought that to life, and I do think he was kind of a very creepy clown. He played that well. But
Yeah.
the newer one that came out, what year did it come out? I really liked it. I did see that one in theater, and it was
Yeah.
spooky.
I think Pennywise
liked it.
should be considered one of the all-time great horror monsters.
Yeah.
Pennywise is terrifying. Absolutely
He's
terrifying.
so scary, and he goes for the whole fear tactic is so real and so raw.
Yeah.
I absolutely love the storyline. Stephen King is a genius when it comes to these
Sure.
horrific storylines.
I've read a lot
but he
of his
does
books,
it so he carefully constructs them so well. So that did make my top 40.
Okay.
What else did? Have you ever seen Big Daddy? with Adam Sandler and Cole and Dylan Sprouse?
Let me say this about Adam Sandler.
Mm-hmm.
I loved Adam Sandler on Saturday Night Live. I
Yeah.
mean, I could even go all the way back to an MTV game show called Remote Control where he made his debut. I loved him on that.
That was from a while ago.
But when he started doing movies, I was kind of a snob.
Mhm.
And so what was it? I think not Happy Gilmore, Billy Madison.
Billy Madison.
So let's go all the way to Billy Madison. When it came out, I kind of dismissed it as sort of a slob comedy sort of a thing.
Yeah.
Had no interest in seeing it. And everyone I knew who saw it was like, oh, it's so funny. It's so good, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, yeah, whatever.
Yeah.
And I was kind of a snob. I turned my nose up to
You're
it.
like, no.
And then like Billy Madison came out, same thing. I was like, I have no interest in seeing that. But then with cable and stuff, you can't help but see it on cable. And I'm like, all right, let me see what all the fuss is. And I'm like, okay, these are funny. These are
Yeah,
great.
he's
So-
he's got a good.
He's an
can-
acquired taste,
Yeah.
I guess. So I liked Billy Madison, really liked Happy Gilmore,
Mhm.
but I felt that he peaked with The Wedding Singer.
Yeah. Oh, he did. That's probably his
chemistry
best film.
with Drew Barrymore was it was a great movie. After that, I was kind of hit and miss with a lot of the stuff that he did after that. But
Yeah.
if you were to ask me what my favorite Adam Sandler movie is, it would be Wedding Singer. And at one time, it was on my 100 greatest movie list, but it may have gotten knocked off at some
It got
point.
bumped off.
Yeah.
It's Swimming with Jaws. I like the movie Big Daddy because, Adam Sandler plays a character. I actually just made my boyfriend watch it. He's kind of a recluse. He doesn't have his life together at all. And then this kid is basically his buddy's out of town, and his buddy finds out he's a dad. Oops, I'm a dad. And this little boy, and this cute, timid little boy, and you just see him. You see the character development, and you feel the character development, and then the end ruins it. But I understand what they did at the end. But that movie for me, there's just something about it. I remember watching it with my cousins and my sister, and I don't know, there's just the dynamic, and there's so many funny scenes in it. There's like a montage in the middle of it, and it's just all these funny scenes of like a real like fatherly figure and a little boy and real relationship stuff, and it just makes you laugh because especially he's trying to teach the kid to go to school and stuff and teaching him about potty training and all this, and this stuff Sonny lets him get away with, and the teacher's like, do you realize what he just did? And he's like, you just got to give him freedom of choice. That's what's wrong with the world nowadays is
Yeah.
kids don't have options.
Would you say it's your favorite Adam Sandler movie?
Well, I've seen so many of them. I don't know if it's my favorite. I don't know. I'd say probably top 3 for sure. But it would be hard for me. I haven't seen a lot of Adam Sandler lately. Like, I remember
Yeah.
watching him a ton as a kid when Grown Ups came out. The Wedding Singer I've seen. Little Nicky I've seen. There's a Cobbler I think I've seen where he's the shoe guy. And there's a few of them that I've seen a lot. I know he had like a newer one come out on Netflix. I wasn't
He
really
did
a fan.
really
I wasn't
dark
a fan
one.
of it.
He did a dark one where he had like a gambling problem and
Was that Uncut Gems or something?
yeah, and I didn't want to see him in that role. I'd rather have him make me laugh than to see him.
I just can't see him
Like
being that
drama.
type of character. It would be
Yeah.
too hard for me. I'd be like, okay, where's the plot twist? When's he gonna jump out with a crazy line?
You know, every comedic actor, I think they have it in their brain somewhere that they want to take that Oscar shot. They want to
Yeah.
win an Oscar, and Robin Williams did it, and Jim Carrey has done his comedic roles and he's done his dramatic roles. Yeah, so comedians always want to try to break into the world of drama, and sometimes it works in the case of Robin Williams, and a lot of times it doesn't. And I don't know if I want to see Adam Sandler in his dramatic role.
What's interesting about it is not to get too much off topic because I know we're at like an hour length, but we're just having such a good conversation because this is what movies does to people. Again, if you haven't, make your 100 best favorite movies list. Actually, do your favorites first, and then you can get critical.
Yeah.
Do your favorites and talk with a friend because it's interesting. You can get into some really cool conversations,
Yeah.
as you can see we are.
I think I mentioned before, this list was inspired by the American Film Institute. They did, back in 1997, they did their 100 greatest American movies. That's what initially inspired me to create my list. Then they revamped it about 10 years later, I think, because they wanted to include Titanic. The original list came out the year Titanic was released, so it didn't make the cut. So I think Titanic kind of prompted them to say, okay, we need to include Titanic, which
Did
is
you
on my
put
list.
I was
by the
going to
way.
ask.
Oh, I think it's one of the greatest
What number
movies
is
ever
it
made.
sitting at?
That's a good question. I'm going to have to scan my list
He's
here
gotta-
real
You
quick.
got to check his list.
Check
Check it twice.
I'll have to get back to you on it. It's on my list. I can't find it
Can't
right
find it?
now. But I do think it's, when the credits rolled as I'm sitting in the theater, I remember thinking, oh, this is one of the greatest movies. There it is. It's number 76 on my list.
76. So
Yeah.
it does make it to the cut. Yes. Yeah, that is a really great movie. I mean, that'll always capture a lot of people's hearts. They did
so
a really
epic.
great job though. That
Yeah.
whole movie. I mean, that's another movie I wouldn't change anything about. I
Yeah.
leave it as is. Of course I would want him to survive, but
You want to hear my top 10?
I do.
All right. So the oldest movie on my list is because I grew up, my family gathered around the TV. Every year around the holidays, this movie would air. I think it was usually around Thanksgiving, was The Wizard of Oz. We watched The Wizard of Oz all the time, and I've seen that movie so many times. And so, that's probably the first movie that I really loved as a kid, and watching it every year up through adulthood, and then going to see screenings on the theater, like at the theater on the big screen. It was always a thrill to be able to see it in an audience with
Right.
children seeing it for the first time. So The Wizard of Oz is number 4 on my list. The Empire Strikes Back.
Okay.
I think the greatest sequel ever made was The Empire Strikes Back. That was, imagine being a kid, being a huge fan of Star Wars, and then they say, Star Wars Part 2 is coming
Dun,
out.
dun,
Oh,
dun.
my God.
Yeah.
And it did not disappoint. The Empire Strikes Back was so great. It was a little dark. Luke gets his butt kicked throughout the entire film, but it's so
absolutely, he
epic,
does.
so good. E.T., the extraterrestrial.
Yeah.
That movie made me blubber like an idiot.
Oh, me
I
too, for
cried.
sure. I cried for
sobbed in the
days.
movie
Yeah.
theater when E.T. gets sick toward the end there.
Yeah.
Who Framed Roger Rabbit? A movie we've never seen anything like it before or since.
We
where
will never see anything
Warner Brothers
like it.
characters and Disney characters appeared on screen together. That will never, ever happen again. It's such a great noir film.
Yeah, for
great
sure.
performances. It was great. That was Robert Zemeckis, who also did Back to the Future. Ghostbusters, again, something we've never seen before or since. These great, great comedians at the time, Bill Murray, Dan Aykroyd, Harold Ramis, doing this kind of slob comedy along the lines of Animal House and stuff, but it had this supernatural sci-fi feel to it, and it just all blended so perfectly together. One of my all-time favorite movies. Jaws is number 9 on my list, and
It made the cut.
of course. Oh yeah, that's a movie I can watch over and over and over again. So many quotable lines.
Yep.
The story that Quint tells about being on the Indianapolis when it sank, and all the military, all the Navy guys being eaten by sharks and stuff. That's just riveting. And then number 10, I think this is one of the most important movies ever made, just because of the leaps in groundbreaking effects, was Jurassic Park.
Oh my
You know,
goodness.
I had
Yeah.
read the book twice, long before the movie came out, and then they said, "Oh, we're going to turn it into a movie." And I said, "There's no way. You can't
How
turn
can
this
you do
book into
that?
a movie. The technology wasn't there yet."
Yeah.
And then they put Steven Spielberg on it as the director, and I'm like, "Okay, I'm curious to see what he's going to do." And I remember seeing the trailer for the first time and going, "Oh my God!
He did
Oh my
that?
God! Did they get real dinosaurs for this?" I mean, the technology was incredible, and it changed everything. Jurassic Park made Hollywood and made movie lovers realize there's nothing you can't do.
Oh,
There's
I
nothing you
100%
can't
agree
bring to
with
life
that.
in theaters. And unfortunately, not a lot of people use the technology as well as Jurassic Park has. You see movies within the last few years that don't look as good as Jurassic Park
No,
did.
not at
And
all,
We're talking
which
30
is
years
sad.
ago. So
Yeah.
that's my top 10. You know, a lot of kids stuff, but these are the movies I saw in the theater that impacted me, that changed me as a human being.
I love those. And I mean, most of them made my list somewhere. I know Wizard of Oz made it at 50,
Nice.
which is a little bit further away, but that is another good one. I think it's just so hard for me with this list because I know what's going to have to change. And there's so many movies I didn't even get to talk about much in depth that I don't want to go too crazy into it. I mean, I had The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe in there. I had Bad Teacher in there. I had How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days. There's so many movies I can't even, we'd have to save it for our own episode because there's so much I can say about it. And then
We'll have to do, I'm going to challenge you sometime next year if we continue doing this.
Oh, we will.
Let's
We'll
do
be
a
back.
rom-com episode.
Yes.
Just talk rom-com.
We will, because we have to, that would be a great one, is that we need to start almost doing it like debate style. What's the best rom-com? Because I would debate this with anyone, and I'm not going to tell you mine. We're going to save this. This will be like our New
Valentine's Day. Valentine's Day, like February. Let's do
Oh,
rom-coms
yeah, right
around
before.
Valentine's.
Yeah, we'll have to have it posted up right before Valentine's Day. That way, yeah, let's do that, because I have one. I'm not going to say it, like I said, but I will debate anyone. It's my favorite rom-com, and I think it's the best. But I can't tell you. And so it's been really fun. I just want to kind of reflect on this year. I know we just started this podcast. Not too. What's it been like?
It's like the fifth one, I think.
Yeah, 5. Big number 5. We're ending the year on an odd number, but still, we've had so much fun in the past weeks. I mean, we've talked about the best scenes in some of these movies. We've talked about the history of these movies. Joe's got to tell me so much insight about things I didn't even know about, especially when we were talking about John Hughes. You taught me so much about different characters, different actors, how interviews went, what they were like, and that was really, really impactful. We've had the most amazing interviews thanks to Joe Johnson. I mean, this guy is the number one guy for any movie history. I'm telling you, he could give you the most amazing facts about movies, and that's what makes it so, so great. So, of course, that's special. And just your insight, hearing your opinions on movies, and kind of having different reflections on how different movies made us feel, or how some have made us feel one way. I know we talked a lot about the rights and the wrongs in horror movie, and that was really interesting because there's a lot of horror movies, but I don't think they'll ever do it like how Scream and Halloween and Friday the 13th had their impact. And then, of course, we had some controversy with Die Hard. Is it a Christmas movie? Which it's so funny. Somebody was on Facebook and they posted this, and I thought about tagging you, and I'm like, nah, he already knows. And it's like, there's 2 types of people in this world. The people that think Die Hard is a Christmas movie, and the people that are wrong, or something like that. And I was like, I should send this to him. And I'm like, we already talked about it.
I do want to say this. First of all, I want to encourage people to sit down and make your own 100 greatest movie list. It's a lot of fun to do.
Everyone should that loves cinema like we do. I 100%. It was so much fun to do.
Yeah.
So much fun to do.
And I also want to say that the majority of the movies that are on my list are on my list because I saw them in a movie theater. And I really want to encourage you to go to the theater, watch Wicked in the theater. Next year, if there's a big movie coming out that you're interested in, go see it in the theater. It's those experiences that shape me and determine whether or not I'm going to include a movie on my list. So get back into the theater, go see movies in the theater with family and friends, and go out afterward and dissect the movie and discuss it and break it down.
Write
Why
a
was it great?
really in-depth critique. I always wanted to be a movie critic. Honestly, that would be the coolest job in the world, because I know there's some movies out there that I could go in and say overhyped. Like, that's all I'd want to say. Do you ever notice when you are looking at critics, like the ones that are bad, it's like the most funny ways of discouraging people from seeing the movies. If you're ever bored, there was I don't know if it was on Reddit or if there's like another app. It's like ranking movies, because I actually Googled it last night. I was like, what does America think are the top 100 movies? And it's interesting because none of them are the same still.
Yeah.
I mean, we see a lot of the names that we've talked about today, which I think, of course, like Jaws was in there, Jurassic Park was in there, Back to the Future, Ghostbusters. Those were all named. Star Wars, of course, was in there. The Hunger Games was in there, but different orders on who thought what Hunger. It's really interesting to kind of look at it as a culture, too, and see what it means to us as a society, like as a whole. Some of these movies brought so many people together and keep people together, I think, too. Like, there's something about characters and relating and feeling connected to other people that feel the same way about movies that I think is so beautiful about our world is that we all appreciate art and movies, especially in different ways. But it's also like some of the movies that Joe's talked about. Now I'm going to go back and rewatch them and just to kind of hear about his perspectives. It's really, really fascinating.
Yeah, the thing about movies, not only are they time capsules that capture the period of time in which they're made, but they also create trends.
Oh,
Like
100%.
I remember hearing a story about a movie, It Happened One Night, which was a multi-Oscar winner that came out in the 30s or 40s.
Yeah.
And at the time, men wore undershirts under
Yeah.
their button shirts. And in the movie, Clark Gable is getting ready for bed. He unbuttons his shirt, and he's not wearing an undershirt. Well, undershirt sales plummeted because, well, if Clark Gable's not wearing an undershirt,
I
I'm not
don't
going to wear an
need to,
undershirt.
yeah.
So that's the impact that movies have on society, that they capture what's happening in society and they cause what's happening in society. And that's
There's
why
a
I
chain
find
reaction.
it so fascinating.
I mean, still to this day, at least this is what I hear. Mean Girls on Wednesdays we wear pink. High schools will have a day devoted to that. Like their whole week of everything leading up to homecoming or prom is Wednesdays everybody wears pink. And I think that's such a cool thing that a movie, this comedy movie, made that impression, like you said, on our world. Like it's a global thing too. It's a global discussion. It's not just this is something that me and my friend think is really cool. We all have been impacted from it. And so I still haven't seen Wicked, but actually my parents were going to go last night to see it. Or Tuesday night, I was like, hold the phone. If I'm going to sit and take a 3-hour final, you are not going to see Wicked without me. And so they didn't see it. They were nice. But that is on my to-do list for the end of the year is to see Wicked.
Yeah, and I'm going to make my prediction that it's going to win multiple Oscars come March.
Oh, you know it is. Except now it's going to be this waiting game for when the next movie comes out.
Yeah,
And I just know it's going to be like this, we talk about it, and then the anticipation is just going to go whoop through that, like everyone's going to be talking about it. And I'm kind of excited to see it. I know maybe we'll talk about this too in the new year. Because I want to see a couple movies, and hopefully now that I have a few weeks off of school, I can kind of sit back and watch some new movies I haven't seen, because I still haven't seen Deadpool 3. So I'm really hoping to watch Deadpool 3 because I heard
it's my favorite movie of the
it's
year.
on Disney Plus, and my cousins, I believe, are going to let me log into their account so I can watch it. So maybe in the new year, that'll be our first episode, because I know you said that was an extravagant movie that must see.
It was, my favorite movie of the year. Not necessarily 100 greatest list material, but definitely my favorite movie of the year, and my favorite movie I've seen maybe over the last few years.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm gonna give it a test, and we'll have to see. I think it's going to be really good. I do. I think it's going to be a showstopper movie that I'm going to have to talk about.
I hope you've
on a
avoided
podcast.
spoilers, because that's what's so fun about the movie. There's some pretty crazy, shocking
I scrolled
moments
past
and
them. Well, it was
twists.
really hard when the movie first came out because everyone was talking about it. I mean, I kind of know one spoiler, maybe. I know there's something about a female Deadpool because with blonde hair or something. And
Yeah,
it was
Blake
Blake
Lively.
Lively
Yeah,
played
yeah.
it. Yeah. So that's the only one that I've really seen, but I don't know too much in detail how that plays into the actual plot of the movie. But I was pretty good about scrolling past things because I didn't want people to ruin it for me. And none of my friends that saw it did ruin it for me. I'm very grateful
That's
that they
awesome.
didn't say anything. Or if they did want to talk about it, they did not text me. I was avoided from that conversation. So that was a good way to be excluded.
Awesome.
But this has been Her Hollywood Highlights. We just talked about 100, well, not 100 movies, but we talked about some of the best movies from Joe Johnson's perspective and me, Lexi McKinney's. We thank you so much for a wonderful 2024, even though there's only 5 editions, and we can't wait to be back in 2025 to see even more and talk about some even more really exciting topics of movies. Alrighty, we're gonna roll it out right now.
Happy New Year, everybody.
And Merry Christmas too, you filthy animal.